Hello, and welcome to the Perry Connection. I'm your host, Jessie Barth, and in the studio with me is my guest, our guest, Hèléne Biandudi Hofer.
Yes.
And you might recognize her as the host of Need to Know on WXXI, which is aired most Thursday nights at 8 o'clock. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. And you said my name perfectly.
Thank you.
Very rare that people say it perfectly.
Why is that, do you think?
I think they get hung up on the Biandudi. They've never seen anything like it before. And then for whatever reason, then my married name, Hofer, I always hear Hofer.
Oh, okay.
So it's funny, but you perfectly.
Well, thank you. Well, let's talk about Biandudi.
Yes.
That's your maiden name?
That is.
Okay. What can you just let us know your background?
Sure.
And how you came to have this unusual but beautiful name.
Thank you.
It's very melodic.
Thank you. So my father is from Central Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo. He was born and raised there. Right. And my grandfather was a banker, political influencer, and eventually walked away from that life for ministry. And he loved the United States, came to the United States for seminary, and eventually said, my father was the oldest, he said, the oldest in my family will live in the United States, will be educated in the U.S., and that was kind of the rest was history. So my father came here in high school through a Christian exchange program and landed in Detroit, Michigan with a pastor and his wife and their children, and that was it. I mean, my father loved the U.S., and my parents eventually met in South Dakota, of all places. It's a very odd story. People are like, South Dakota, how did your dad ever end up there? But for college. So he went to the University of Sioux Falls, and that's where my parents met.
And was your mother also a student there?
She was.
Okay.
She was, yes.
Okay. Now, can we talk a little bit about his experience when he came from Africa? Because my uncle was a missionary in Africa, and my cousins grew up in Africa. So I feel like I have some relationship with that continent.
Right.
And also having lived abroad, you know, what was it like for your father to come to this country? Was it love at first sight? Did he feel any prejudice? You know, what?
Right. Well, I don't know. In terms of Detroit, very diverse city.
Yes.
Went to the public school system, public school system. And my father acclimated rather quickly. I mean, he came in, he was a sophomore, and the next thing you know, he was junior class, and I'm pretty sure senior class president.
Oh, great.
So this was just kind of one of those things where I think people were enamored with him just a little bit, because here is this African who kind of looks like us, but has an accent, is a little different, very studious, very much about his education.
Probably very confident.
Very confident. My father had a lot of pride in a good way, and I think that people were drawn to him. And so, in terms of acclimating to school, I think it was relatively quickly.
Right.
Prejudice, absolutely. You know, absolutely, especially my parents together, for sure.
Because your mother is white.
My mom is Caucasian, and then father African, and they got married at a time when in some states it was not legal for two races to come together and form a union. So I think of the loving story, and my parents were very much like the loving story.
Yes, beautiful, and what a beautiful woman you are.
Oh, thank you.
You know, they must be so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, so your parents met and were married.
Yes.
In South Dakota?
In Minnesota, actually.
Minnesota,
They got married in Minnesota.
But sort of Midwest. Okay. Then you were born in Columbus, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
So tell us about your upbringing, and I know you have a brother.
I do, yep. So I've an older brother, just the two of us, and both of my parents were educators. So we landed in Columbus because my father got his PhD from the Ohio State University. My mother taught elementary school there. And growing up, I was always my father was very confident, and he raised a daughter to be very confident.
Really?
as
You're
well.
confident.
That was how I was raised to be. And I loved it. I love Columbus.
It's a beautiful city.
It's a beautiful city. It's grown and changed dramatically over the last 2 decades. So every time I visit, I discover something new. But I went to Columbus Public Schools, and I love school. I love learning. I was always curious, and my parents instilled those values within my brother and myself, and demonstrated them just in terms of, what it takes to make it and to create a life for yourself, in which you'll be happy and you'll feel like you're doing something in the world and helping in some small way to make a change in the world. So that's really, how we were raised to be.
That's great. Now, I know that something really influential happened in your life when you were in 5th grade.
Yes, 4th grade. Yes, you're so good. You have the best memory. Oh my gosh.
Okay, 4th grade.
Yes.
All right, can you tell us that story?
So I am in the hallway. My art teacher comes up to me and she says, "Hèléne, my sister is in town. She's actually coming to the school today, and she is going to put on an assembly for the entire school, and local media outlets will be here because my sister's here." And I'm thinking, who is your sister? And she said, "Oh, by the way, my sister is a reporter for CBS in New York City." And so the media is super excited that she's here. And so would you mind if she could interview you? So all of your classmates get an idea of what it's like to be a journalist. And so that was what the assembly was about. And so my art teacher knew that I loved to talk, and I said, absolutely. So we do this interview, and Erin Moriarty is the name of the journalist. And she was asking me all these questions and kind of doing this Q&A with the audience, the students. And
do you remember any of the questions? I mean, what do you ask a 4th grader?
I don't. I'm sure things like, tell me about your favorite subject and why. What are you learning? And kind of not the questions that would create a yes or no answer, but more so a dialogue and a conversation. Just very much like you're a great interviewer like this.
Thank you.
And so after we were done, I asked her, "Do you get paid to do this?" And she was like, "Well, of course, this is my job." And I remember I went home and I said to my parents, because I was raised by educators, I just naturally assumed that I would be a teacher. And I said, "Mom, Papa, I am not going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a TV reporter." And I remember, my parents said, "Okay. And just so you know, it is a very competitive field. So you have to prepare yourself for what that means." And for my parents, basically that meant starting young. So I had the microphone, I had the video camera, I had the video camera in the suitcase that you would prop over your shoulder. I mean, it's called faithing it. There's a pastor by the name of Jessie Barth, and he talks about faithing things. And it was about faithing it, like kind of creating and putting yourself in that role at a young age. And so it started then.
The outcome.
And it just continued.
Yeah. Yeah. So you told me, too, about what you used to do in the neighborhood to prepare for this role.
Yes.
I love it. Yes. It shows your initiative. Can you share that, please?
So my best friend was just like always by my side. And so...
And what is her name?
Amanda. And so I said, "Amanda, let's take the video camera and let's go around the neighborhood and get stories." And so it wasn't easy, you're strolling around the neighborhood. Stories don't just necessarily come about. And so if I saw a kid on a bike, I would run up to the kid and start asking, him or her questions. And then it got to the point where I would have to create stories because there just wasn't enough action in the neighborhood. So we would do the whole knock on someone's door. They would open up the door and just have a conversation with them. And I would definitely pick and choose the homes that I knew. I was going to say,
did you get any doors closed in your face?
No. I knew my parents would find out if I showed up just at a random home. So and that's what we would do. We would create these shows, and I would create fashion shows and commercials and news stories, and we would interview each other, and we would put these stories together, and we would have this VHS tape, which, foreign concept now to have a VHS tape, and it would be about an hour to an hour and a half long. And we would do this on a regular basis, and we would write up invitations for our teachers, and we would hand deliver these special invitations that we created, and they were invited to a special screening of our stories. And they would get to see our film. Mm-hmm. And we would go to the popcorn outlet, buy bags of popcorn, so they felt like they were at an actual screening. Yeah. And we put on this entire show for our teachers. And it was just, I think they still talk about it to this day.
I'm sure. Do you still have all the VHS?
No. So one of them, the first one, was so good, and that was actually, Amanda was the oldest of 10 kids, and so I think one of her brothers or sisters kind of shared it, and then it got passed around, and we never saw it again. But we do have others, so they do exist.
In the archives. So when you're really, really famous, they'll come out. Right. They'll come out. Good. Well, I'd like to sort of segue into college. You went to NYU?
I did. I went to American University in D.C. for 2 years, and I transferred to NYU.
And why was that? Wow.
I transferred because American University in the heart of D.C., as you can imagine, politics was the hot topic. Politics is not necessarily my thing. Yes, I do cover stories about politics, but it's not my forte or an area of passion for me. And so I decided to transfer to NYU because I felt as though their journalism program was a bit more out of the box, and you could kind of create for yourself a curriculum at that point in time.
Oh, that's great.
That would work for you. And it was the best thing that I did.
Well, just being in New York City anyway.
Oh my gosh, yes. The entire city is like your campus.
That's
so it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Good. And so upon graduating from NYU, did you go back to Columbus, stay in New York?
I had every intention of staying in New York City or traveling to any of the 100 cities that I sent my reel to. So when you graduate from a journalism program, you have a reel, which is a compilation of all of your work, news stories that you've covered. And I sent out, Jessie, maybe 110. I'll never forget it. I had to have the cab. I had bags and bags of VHS. I created these envelopes with my resume and cover letter. And I went to the NYU Mail Center and I mailed out over 100 tapes. And so I thought for sure either something in New York City would work or somewhere else. I wasn't necessarily planning on going back home for a long period of time. I thought, well, maybe my mom will come and pack me up, and then I'll move to some city or something along those lines. And that definitely was not the case. I got every single response that I did get back, if I did get a response, was a thanks but no thanks.
Okay.
And it was hard. It was incredibly difficult for a year and about a half. I tried and tried and tried, and all my friends, my classmates were going to Fargo, North Dakota, and Savannah, Georgia, and St. Louis, to pursue these reporting jobs, and nothing panned out for me. So I decided I'm going to look on the bright side. I'm an optimist. So I said, you know what? I get a year and a half. I'll work. I'll save, some money at home, and I'll travel. And that's what I did.
Oh, great.
So it was it was a really interesting journey. And I actually showed up at news stations too. I would show up and ask to see the news director. Some of them were kind enough to give me an audience, but did not pan out really into anything.
Right. Okay, so let's fast forward to 48 hours?
Yes.
Okay, so that's pretty exciting.
It is, yeah. So
how did that just quickly come about then?
Well, it took some time. That Erin Moriarty, that same journalist who interviewed me, for the assembly in elementary school, I never lost touch with her. So when I was at NYU, I interviewed her for a project, and after about a year in Columbus with no job, I called her up and I said, Erin, I will take, it doesn't need to be a reporting position. I'll take anything that will get me in a newsroom so I can get acclimated to a newsroom environment. So she put in a good word for me at the local CBS station in Columbus. I was hired as an associate producer. I worked there for a period of time, and then it was not the best situation. It was some environments you work in are toxic, and I felt as though at that point in time in my life that it was somewhat of a toxic environment.
All right, let me just ask you a little bit. Did it have anything to do with being a woman? Did you, you see some of these issues that are coming up now, that was not part of it, or?
It was, I felt as though they gave me a great opportunity, a great chance. It was kind of in certain fields, and it doesn't necessarily mean every newsroom will be like this, but there were a great group of people, but then there was just a lot of negativity.
Okay.
And that was what I was not okay with.
Right.
And
Good. Okay.
the certain deadlines, I saw how certain reporters felt, and I saw some of the newsroom politics, and I didn't like it.
Yeah, my husband and I have this running joke about the divine boot, that somehow we get booted out of something negative into something more positive, and it sounds like that happened in your case.
So I put in my resignation after a year, and I did public speaking, and I did a few different jobs, and then that best friend of mine, Amanda, she and I decided we're just going to take a leap of faith and move to New York City. No job in place, nothing situated for us. Amanda actually was the one who took the initiative, went and found an apartment for us and everything. And I showed up, I called Erin, and I said, Erin, I am in New York. This is that same Erin Moriarty. And if you know of any openings, I would be happy to come in and interview. And it just so happened that there was a position at 48 Hours, and they were seeking somebody for a production team member. And so I interviewed.
So what great experience to have.
Yes.
Good. Now, how long were you there?
So I worked at 48 for about 4 years.
Okay. And following that, then, I guess what I'm getting to is what brought you to Rochester?
Sure. So my father, who you asked about, we were very, very close. In 2010, he passed away. And it was just kind of when significant life events like that take place, I think we take a look at our lives, and we take a step back.
And that's probably a good thing.
I think it's a great thing. I think it's a wonderful thing. And it's part of the mourning process. And I decided I wanted a change. And I love New York City, but I didn't want to just go all the time. And I felt, you just kind of sometimes you feel in your heart and you feel in your spirit, it's time for a change. It's time for a move.
Would you call that intuition?
I would say intuition. I would say a God wink. I always use that term God wink, and there's a book called God, about God winks, and I think sometimes it's the way that God lets you know I've got something else for you.
That's great.
And that's what I really, really felt.
And do you trust that now?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, absolutely. Because I haven't ever had it not. It doesn't necessarily mean it's always what I wanted, but it's always taken me on the right course.
Step by step.
Right.
Great.
Right.
So you found yourself in Rochester.
I did.
And you're working now as...
So now I'm an entrepreneurial journalist. So at this point in time, I own a media company. I contract with WXXI, which is our local PBS and NPR station. And so I do a show. I host and produce a program for them. They are a phenomenal station.
Yes.
In terms of the types of stories that they expect and want their journalists to cover. And the stories of depth and not just surface level, quick, 90-second pieces. So I get to do that, and I absolutely love it. And then I work on other projects as well.
So what are some of your other projects?
I started a special project near and dear to my heart, which we launched. I call it like the mountain peak, but I have like a lot of mountains to climb with this project. But it's called The Empty Hangar. And it is a web series, solely lives online, and basically the focus is we're covering stories about clothing, and not fashion stories, but the ways in which, and how I should say, clothing impacts our lives. the impact of clothing on religion, or how clothing can affect a variety of things between education, criminal justice, politics, and clothing.
Right. It's such a personal expression.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, if our audience is wanting to find out about this, can you, what address
Absolutely.
would
So
they?
theemptyhanger.tv.
Okay. Now, I know how you came up with The Empty Hanger as the title, but can you share that?
I was
Bringing in your husband?
racking my brain, and I'm doing Google searches on titles, and it's like everything that I wanted was already taken. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to get sued. I don't want anything to happen. Right. And so my husband and I went to dinner with my mom and my cousin, and we're having dinner. We're like going back and forth brainstorming. And then we get home, and my husband says to me as we pull in the driveway, I've got it. And I'm like, what is it? He's like, The Empty Hanger. And at first I was just like, The Empty Hanger. And he was like, picture this. And so I said, okay. And he's like, so I'm just imagining, the closet doors opening, or you see a closet and you see a hand pull something off a shirt or a dress or a tie or anything off of a hanger, the hanger swinging, and you're left wondering who took it, what did they take, why did they take it, where are they going, what's their story, what are they doing? And he said, that's what you're doing. You're really talking about all these different things. And so I think it just kind of opens people up to a type of curiosity. Yes. And I love it. My husband comes up with the best ideas, though.
Good.
He's like, we collaborate, we brainstorm back and forth, but he always picks the best things.
Now, just tell us a little bit, and I know we have a photo of you and your very handsome husband.
Thank you.
What is his name, and what does he do, just very briefly?
Sure. So Terry, and he is in
Gary
education.
Hofer. Okay.
Terry Hofer, former teacher, former principal, and now he works for a nonprofit by the name of WXXI. They're based in California, but they have offices all over, and he's kind of their northeastern lead. So his whole focus is working on school turnaround. I'm working with schools that need support in terms of whether it's supporting teachers, supporting administrators. He works on equity issues, whether racial or socioeconomic equity issues in school, and so on.
Good. What a great team. And you came back to education. You actually married an educator.
Yes, I very much did, and very much married someone like my father.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so believe it or not, we're going to have to wrap this up within a couple of minutes. Okay. It goes by so quickly. We'll have to have you back.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I want to talk about what's really the most important aspect to interviewing, and what have you learned the most about yourself that you can share with the public? We know you went after your dream. We know that you love what you do. Right. What can you give me one word of wisdom, or give us one thing that you've really learned that you'd like to pass on?
Sure. I think it's, in terms of interviewing, there is a special connection that whether or not you agree with the person that you're interviewing, that doesn't matter. There is some type of connection that takes place when you're sitting across from someone, and as I said, you're a phenomenal interviewer. You can tell that the person cares, and when I genuinely care about the people I'm talking to and the stories that I'm covering, and when that connection happens, the best of that story will come about. And usually when it comes to storytelling, I love solution journalism and finding solutions to things.
Yes.
And that's what I try to pull from an interview, is that. Okay. And if there's a bridge building moment, a connecting piece for the audience, something that will make the viewer say, okay, I can do something, or I learn something, or I see my role in this world in a different way.
I love that idea of the solution.
Yes.
You want the solution. And that is something that I think in these times where we have lots of opinions and everyone wants to give them, and so-called sides, that just if everyone is looking for the solution to the problem.
Very true.
Your voice is really needed.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. And I know you make a difference in Rochester.
Oh, they're the people who
Giving voice. You're giving voice.
And that's
You're
the most
giving them
important
the
thing.
voice.
Is
Yes.
so people have a platform to share what's going on, whatever topic we're covering, whatever story. It's so important to seek out the voices that we don't often always hear, on the news. So whether that's the youth voice, if you're ever covering anything, you should always find the person that's involved in that realm, that can share their perspective. I always look for example, we have a special focus at WXXI on inclusion and creating inclusive communities for people of all abilities. And so when we're talking about stories of someone who might be differently abled or however they would like to define their condition, you don't just talk to the leaders of organizations who are working on these things. You go straight to the person who is directly impacted by whatever it is that you're talking about, because that's where you're going to get the best perspective.
So it's what you're really saying is heart to heart.
Exactly.
Not head to head.
Exactly.
As much as heart to heart.
Perfect way to put it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think you achieved that because I've seen you on air, and I just really want to encourage you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Now, as a final thought, you're here in a little community in
Yes.
Western New York, Perry,
Yes.
New York. Our population in this village is about 3,300. Bigger size. Now I know that you've come to Perry several times.
I have. Yes.
You spoke at the Rotary, and you came to interview Josh Rice, who started the New York State Puppet Festival.
Yes.
So can you just, I think to wrap up, give me just your perspective of the small town, and I don't mean just Perry, but just sort of these lovely old villages in Western New York. Do you have any insights? Any thoughts?
I will use Perry as an example, because when I first met you, I will never forget you saying, sometime you have to come and visit me in Paradise. And I was like, wow, I'm intrigued. I have got to go and see Jessie and see what Paradise is about. And I know I interviewed you for the Empty Hangar, and the Rotary, you invited me to speak with the Rotary. And I will be honest with you, I was blown away. And I was blown away for a couple different reasons. For one, going to a small town looking like me, my skin tone, I have some fears personally because of experiences that I've had in my own life.
Really? I'm sorry.
And I remember thinking like, okay, let's see how this will go.
Really?
I did. And I was so welcomed.
Oh,
and
my
people
gosh.
were so warm and so loving.
Yes.
And it was just like I was embraced. And it wasn't just so that right away I just felt at ease and I felt so comfortable here. And then from the Rotary to talking with Josh Rice and meeting and doing interviews with people associated with the New York State Puppet Festival, there is a strong heartbeat here. And it is very, very powerful. And it was so awesome to see how a small community can create something so incredible like the New York State Puppet Festival. Your very strong art scene here really blew me away as well. And also, in terms of talking with the Rotary, to hear the incredible people that you've invited to come and speak of all different backgrounds, sharing a variety of different stories, and how involved the members of this community are, and different civic things. I mean, it was really enlightening. It was eye-opening, and it was great to see that there is this really special spirit here. And when I have to tell you, when the story aired on the New York State Puppet Festival, my mother, who lives in St. Petersburg, Florida, and watches every show, she said,
Of course.
I have to get to Perry.
Oh, great.
She was like, I have to go to Perry. She said, I wish I were going to be visiting during the Puppet Festival. But it's clear that this is a special place, and special things are happening here.
Thank you.
And it was really good for me to come for a variety of reasons.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that's wonderful. I saw it as soon as I moved here in 2005. And so I'm glad you see it too. And I think maybe our final thought is just that heartbeat. That we all have that pulse, and just wherever we are, that heart to heart, and that pulse, that lively pulse. we can all get together with
Absolutely. It's a connecting force.
It is a connecting force.
Yes.
And that's perfect. Thank you for coming to the Perry Connection.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking me to
Oh, we'll have you back.
Okay,
There's
sounds
lots
good.
more
I
to
would
talk
love it.
about.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on the Perry Connection. We'll see you again next month.
You're just another